I talk about our human future, where I take on what I think of as another kind of moral disease, these transhumanist types who, confronted with the complexity and difficulty of being human, decide that really we're set on a path to transcend the human. And people like Ray Kurzweil and so on, who say that there's that glorious future in which we and our problems won't exist. We'll be replaced by cyborgs. We might ourselves become cyborgs and exist purely as in cyberspace, and to be downloaded whenever we need to get a breath of stale air. And I try to point out in that last chapter that everything that we actually value depends upon our mortality. And this is a theme I developed elsewhere in a little book on Wagner's Tristan and Isolde, that actually, if you understand human love properly, you'll recognize that it's a relation between dying things, and a relation which recognizes that. And to take away mortality, disease, threats, fragility, grief, and so on, and you take away the source of all our happiness too.
Unless we come to terms with how we incorporate birth and death into our lives, and birth usually goes with having a permanent partner of the other sex, I would strongly recommend under the public and ecclesial observation of committed marriage, because even the most ardent atheist social scientists know that institutions matter, and unless we also wholeheartedly integrate death into our lives, we cannot have any optimal grip on what happens between birth and death. At the core of evolution is defiance of death. There are two fundamental statements each and every one of us puts forward in communicating to others. It's giving trust ahead of time in the sense of don't kill me, and don't leave me alone in my mortality. It is a keep on keeping on. And while there was a center for a culture, while there was a culture focused around a symbol unifying life and death at the same time, and how to overcome this tension, there was a binding of society. But at the loss of a center, the loss of a culture means that we have lost this religio, this binding together. But the desire for it remains. It is still in us, because there is an innate desire of development to overcome death. That is what propels humans forward. And so we are at a loss today, as society and culture in the West has lost the key to the symbolic transformation of that question in our daily lives. It is obvious, given modern materialist science and relativism that we experience every day, what we are left with is the pure nihilist realization that we are alone in our mortality, we are alone in birth and death. And so what we have to overcome, what we have to come back to, we have to play and act and artistically reconfigure ourselves to realize how to deal with the most important experiences of life, being, birth, and death. We have to put these back into the center of our lives, our cultures, a birth-giving culture, a death-commemorating society, because if we don't, then we don't have a frame from which we can grasp everything that happens in between. And then we are bound to fail, become miserable, because we are alone in life. Being alone in birth and death is a precondition for being alone in life. Unless we learn again how to come together in birth and death as a culture, we will continue to suffer the meaning crisis.
The gestalt of being itself is a Gödel gestalt, meaning it is a whole with a Gödel point. But that Gödel point, if you approach it correctly, is the source of negentropy. But if you use the Gödel point instead to avoid the Gödel point, it's entropy. It's equilibrium and death. So your choice of how you relate to the Gödel point is basically the choice of life or death, the choice of entropy or negentropy. And at this point in history, as the Gödel point, in my opinion, is becoming more and more visible and vivid, then the absolute choice is becoming more and more unavoidable And by absolute choice, I mean basically how you choose to relate to the Gödel point. Do you choose to dwell in it or to use it to make yourself indestructible? That is becoming like that decision is now becoming clear at this moment of history. And it defines every level of the stack from the personal to the worldview, actually. And it's the choice of entropy or negentropy, the life or death, right? But one of the reasons we choose to use the Gödel point to be invincible, because isn't invincibility life? Isn't that to choose life? Isn't it to choose the Gödel point death? The great conspiracy. It's the exact opposite. Choosing the Gödel point is life, and choosing the Gödel point for indestructibility is death, actually. But on the face of it, rationally, you would associate indestructibility being right with life and survival. But the truth is the non-rational. The true isn't the rational. The true is that actually giving up indestructibility is how you live. Because once you give up indestructibility, you gain flexibility, dance, life, insight versus rationality, or the Zwingli. You gain all of these things, authentic resonance, and you find life in that, right? So what's basically happening is at this moment in history is a certain alignment of the personal and the worldview. It's all kind of the fractal of it all is becoming vivid. And what you learn on the personal level is actually what you need to employ on the worldview level. And it all kind of goes up and down.